recording. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode 58. Here we are. We're still alive. We're still a company. We didn't get canceled.
No canceled today.
We're here. So we're back again here to talk about all things dogs. Let me flip my phone over so I don't get distracted by notifications coming in. I need to start keeping my phone downstairs or something. I'm so, when my phone's sitting there, if it's like this, I'm just constantly
yeah.
Let me just peek over real quick. Anything new going on over there? Anything new going on over there?
There we go.
Addicted, if you will. Addicted to the notifications.
Well, also you have, a lot of people trying to contact you all the time.
Yes.
So,
So hope our last podcast was well received. So Josh and I did a podcast over the weekend discussing all of the Miracle Canine controversy and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling Josh before we filmed this, I'm kind of done with all of that right now.
Yeah.
I'm taking a mental vacation, if you will, from the negativity for a little bit, So for everybody that's not filled in, we've just been getting hammered by these positive only trainers or force feed trainers, if you will, or positive advocates or whatever it may be. You can see it all through our comment section. And I really this kind of goes hand in hand with what I was talking about the other day. I listened to the Michael Ellis, Ivan Balabinoff podcast the other day, and they were talking about the force-free movement and talking about how, if we want to make some change in the dog training world, right? If we want to, ultimately do better for dogs, do better for owners, et cetera, we have to be able to sit down and have some conversations about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everybody, because dog training, and this is the one thing everybody, I think we could all kind of agree on a little bit here, right? Because dog training is an unregulated industry, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's going to disagree with certain parts of what somebody's doing, and they're really, for as much as people want to say, well, the vets or the scientists or the this or the that ultimately has the say-so of what's right and what's wrong. The industry's unregulated, so there's no, that only holds as much water as you care about the person, like I always say, when it comes to certifications or regulations or any of those types of things, right? Yeah. So because of that, there's always going to be stuff we disagree on, and I think it's really important that we could have honest conversations about those things without thinking we are so 100% correct about stuff. Listen, I think the things that I'm doing are correct, right? I think the things actually, let me rephrase that, right? I think the things I'm doing, I have very clear reasons to why I do them.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're always the best or greatest ways to do those things, and I can admit that, right? There are certain things that if I really wanted to get in the weeds of what's the most, appropriate and efficient way of training dogs or working through this or working through that, we could have discussions about those kinds of things, and I'd be open to saying a lot of the things that I do, technically speaking, with my personal dogs, I would probably do them differently. But there's a reason for all those things. There's variables outside of just me that I have to factor into stuff, right? Yeah. Again, safety variables with things, time constraint variables of, if we're working with older dogs or we're working with situations where we have to get a handle on things much faster than a year, 2 years, 3 years, stuff like that. I have to weigh all those variables. And another one that came to mind the other day when I was thinking about things, working with elderly people, right? When you get into strength variables of stuff and physical limitations of some people as far as being able to physically manage and control your dog, right? Those are more variables you have to factor in as far as the different types of tools we use and et cetera, right? And the point of all this being, right? I was talking to Bridget the other day. There's a lot that can be learned from force-free trainers, right? I always say, when it comes to the kind of positive-only movement, or again, whatever word you want to use for it, I understand that positive-only does not, technically speaking, exist, because if you get into the quadrants of learning, right, just simply the fact that they use leashes, right? A leash utilizes negative reinforcement. It's pressure and it's release, regardless of how aversive it's perceived by the dog, obviously, right? But, one thing that I have a lot of respect for in that industry is, since they are relying on a smaller portion of quadrants, obviously, and they're trying their hardest to work through things and as in a efficient and quote unquote humane of a way as possible, it requires them to be extremely, extremely creative with the types of things they're doing in order to manage these dogs and in order to ultimately work through these issues. And again, I think there's there's limitations as far as that kind of stuff. I think that still to this day, there's no real visual proof of some of the dogs that we work with or the types of dogs that we work with being rehabilitated in the way that we're able to kind of work through those types of things.
Yeah.
But there's a hell of a lot that can be accomplished, and you have to have a deep understanding of the science of things and of how animals learn and how markers work and how you can motivate dogs differently and stuff like that. And those are great conversations I think all of us would want to have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And on the contrary, this is the hardest part about all this kind of stuff, right? Because in a lot of their minds, we are simply just the fact that we would resort to ever using an e-collar or ever using a prong collar. In their mind, immediately we are animal abusers, right?
Yeah.
We are immediately the scum of the earth. The conversation will never happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know what the freaking solution is for that. You know what I mean?
know.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is for that. And I don't know how we get to a point where we're able to have conversations about this in an open and honest way, right? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I think unfortunately the ball's kind of in their court. So many of us balance trainers, we want to talk about it, in a non-shameful way, right? Like, it gets frustrating, and I get emotionally heated about stuff like I did on the last podcast, obviously, because they won't have the conversation. They won't talk about it with us.
Nope.
You know what I mean? And it's so frustrating. So whatever. We entertained it for a little bit. I think that we got some really good educational content out of some of the conversations that I had just obviously with you on the podcast where we discussed some of the things they were talking about, but I think we've gotten about as far as we're going to get with that. So we're taking kind of a mental vacation from all of that for a little bit here. I'm not whatever. The invitation is still open. If there are any trainers that do want to have a conversation, it's non-judgmental. You know what I mean? Come on, let's just talk. There's not going to be any finger pointing or, hey, I hate what you're doing or I hate what you're doing. Because I said before, I don't hate what you're doing. Right? Yeah. I don't like the coming on people's pages and harassing people and stuff like that, but I don't hate what you're doing. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, there's things that we could learn. So let's have the conversation.
Yeah.
That's it. Right?
Exactly.
So what we're going to do today, we got some questions and stuff that came through that I noticed on the YouTube channel the other day. We're going to burn through some of those, see what kind of conversations get sparked from any of it, and just have a little bit of just a good old-fashioned dog training talk.
There we go.
So let's see what we got here. We got some notifications in the corner. Josh, my eyesight ain't working too well.
Okay.
Whatever. All right. Let's start here. What do we got?
Let's see. Well, this is kind of what we've already been talking about. So Complete Canine says, ugh, I had the same thing happen with a positive-only trainer from Seattle. Purple hair, typical hipster wannabe protester. Turns out she's actually pushing to ban remote callers, and she targeted one of my posts to start a war.
Ugh. Let's see. Here we go. What do we... Totally get it. Very frustrating. We need to start having the hard conversations with each other when we disagree if we actually want to make some change. That's really what it comes down to.
Dang.
All right. Let's move away from that. What else we got here? All right. So this was on Dog Vlog, the 1% extreme dog reactivity cases. What we got here?
All right. This is from Chris here. I have a doodle that I've been training. He's now 2 years, and the main problem I'm having is he's been lunging and barking not only at other dogs, but people, which is scaring the shit out of me. Understandable. The real serious part of this problem is I never know when this will occur, especially with people. I've been using an e-collar, a pinch collar, and a 550. What's a 550?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Obviously, none of them are really doing the trick, probably because I'm not doing it correctly. problem with doing a correction is that I may be unloading the car and I'm just holding on to the dogs before we go upstairs, or any number of things. And so you have to have your finger on that collar button, and that's not always possible. Do you have any suggestions for me? I'm open to anything.
I do have some suggestions.
Ooh.
All right, so here's the thing, right? So there's a couple of misconceptions in this post, right? So one is, let's start with the most obvious of them, right? And the most common issue that I see with people is that you have to have your finger on the collar button at all times, right? That is just not the case, and that is such a surefire way to know that you're never going to have success with this kind of stuff, right? So you looking up what a 550 is?
Yeah, I think it's
the type of e-collar,
yes,
probably.
the Garmin.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Hear that vibration?
Yeah, truck.
It's really rattling my whole house.
Yeah, Jesus.
There's a truck going by. Jesus Christ. Okay, so you being stuck on having that finger on the button at all times is a surefire way to ensure that your dog is never going to get past these issues, right? Because it does a couple of things, right? So by having this assumption, I got my e-collar right here, that I got to be ready to tap this button as soon as my dog does it. What happens is everything becomes contingent on this thing, right? And listen, initially as we're going through the training process, this is a very important tool, right? This is going to be something you're going to contingent on having, obviously, right? But ultimately, the point of the e-collar here is that is an extension of whatever we are currently doing. It is not its own independent thing that's doing the work.
Yes.
Right? So this is where you get into some of the conversations from people that are pushing for better e-collar training or this or that, is that too many dogs and too many owners are getting stuck on just having this thing at all times. Right?
Yep.
And this is what does everything. There's no motivation behind anything. There's no understanding between the dog and the human aside from, I push this button, you listen. I push this button, you listen.
Yep.
Right? That's not what we want, right?
No.
This e-collar, when I'm working with my dogs, stays in my pocket at all times. I almost never have this thing actually in hand. If my dogs have it on in the house, this thing is typically sitting in some sort of central location where my wife and I both know where it is, but it's never actually on our person because we have a very clear understanding of how markers work and how to connect consequences to behaviors and how to connect consequences to ourselves, right? Again, we've talked about this before. Our goal of dog training, right? The magic formula behind dog training is having the ability to clearly tell the dog yes and no in a way that they understand, right? And that comes down to identifying things clearly and creating conditioned associations with certain words, right? Let's take a positive marker, for example. Let's take good or yes or whatever you want to, a click, right? There's a reason why when people are using clicker training or marker-based training or any of those types of things, they have an extensive process of conditioning in their marker first before they go to implement it. And how do they do that? Let's say this pen's the clicker, and let's say I got a pocket full of treats here. What they're going to do is they're going to click, give a reward. Click, give a reward. Click, give a reward over and over and over and over again with a spacing between the two of them. And what the goal is they want to start to see that well before they actually ever go to give the dog the reward, that when they hear click, the dog immediately elicits a positive association.
Yep.
In anticipation of the reward, right? That's where the real dopamine hit kicks in with the dog and where that anticipation of reward actually starts to become a, yes, this thing that I did right here, that's correct, and I'm about to get rewarded for it, right?
Yeah.
That's what allows you to have precision with your training. That's what allows you to clearly say that very specific thing right there that I clicked right when you did that thing is what you're about to get rewarded for. Because if you're relying on your timing of give that food reward without any sort of marker the second the dog does behavior, you're never going to be able to have the precision that you need in order to teach more complex behaviors, nor will you have a really clear way to elicit that dopamine hit in the dog and get them to a point where they do have that positive association with things, right? Because it'll be too random to them. It's like, yeah, they eat the treat and like it's positive when they're eating it and stuff, but that like rewarding feeling that they get that actually increases their behavior, that's kind of coming at a very variable time because you don't have it conditioned into something very specific. Does that make sense? Am I saying that in a weird way?
No.
Okay. Now let's take our negative marker. Now, I'm not one that's going to sit here and say you need to go about conditioning in your negative marker and tell your dog no, then shock them. Tell your dog no, then shock them, like randomly and for the purpose of conditioning in that word. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because that wouldn't necessarily be fair. Yes, we do have to have that same association with our negative marker like we do with our positive marker. But because typically speaking, positive punishment or a aversive or something like that is going to be a stronger response from the dog, that word will condition itself in very quickly just through general use. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's not going to be as challenging of a thing as the dog eliciting a positive response to something where that takes tons and tons of repetitions, you know? This, because they're like, oh shit, I want to avoid that. They're going to very quickly realize no means correction is coming, right? Yep. So what I recommend for everybody, I did a lesson yesterday with a dog. Would you remember? Oh, you remember Major, the German Shepherd we did a couple videos with?
Yep.
Okay, so Major came in for a brush-up session yesterday, and the wife is having all these issues with handling him, right? She's just like, the husband did like the send-home lesson, the husband did all the follow-up training, and he's been going out of town, and he went out of town recently, and she started realizing, oh shit, like I don't have any control over this dog.
Yeah.
You know, because the husband's done pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. So the number one problem that I saw was she was just glued to this thing in her hand, right? So we just focused on that entire session. I was like, get the e-collar remote out of your fucking hand, right? I was like, put it on your neck. Don't even touch the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And we focused on her just giving clear information to the dog and making sure if we needed to give corrections for things, those corrections came at the appropriate time after our verbal commands and our markers and our information that we were giving our dog came, and we fixed all of her timing related issues. And what a freaking transformation we saw from the beginning of that session to the end of that session, just in her confidence and ability to communicate clearly to the dog. Yeah. She started for the first time noticing, wow, my dog is looking at me. My dog's not looking at the e-collar remote. He's looking at me.
Yeah.
And my dog is listening to me. My dog's listening to my marker. She started seeing that when she would tell the dog no, the dog was like, oh shit, and would look at her. You know what I mean? She started seeing the power of her words, because it wasn't like, click, 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 you know what I mean? Like, I gotta be so fast and clicking on the button and stuff like that, right? So this is the biggest misconception here, is you need to start looking at things in that light, and you need to start getting yourself detached from your remote a little bit. We still have to use it. We still have to punish for these behaviors, right? But it should only come after we've given clear information to the dog.
Yep.
So getting back to this person's situation, let's take their reactivity, and we'll get into the second part of things, which is the actual addressing of the reactivity, obviously. Mm-hmm. But let's say, hypothetically, we need to correct for the dog reacting. We're unloading shit from the car. Mm-hmm. We don't have the e-collar in our hand. It's in our pocket. It's in your purse, whatever, right?
Yep.
Get your dog out. And if your dog does the thing that you don't want them to do, tell them no, right? Mark the behavior, right? Forget the fucking e-collar remote for a minute. And if when you tell your dog no in that moment, the dog doesn't immediately go, oh shit, I shouldn't do that, focus in on you and think, I know I'm going to get corrected for this in a minute, you've seen your problem.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Your problem is that you have not gained any verbal control over your dog. You've only gained visual control when you have the remote.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. That's where the magic happens. So tell your dog no. And here's the other side of things. Let's say when you say no, the dog stops doing the behavior because you do start conditioning it in over time. Still get your remote. Still give the correction.
Yep.
Because no is not the correction. No is our marker. No differently than the clicker is not the reward. The clicker is the marker. Mm-hmm. Even if the dog does the correct thing, when you click, you're still going to give them a treat. Mm-hmm. If we say no, we're still going to give a correction for that, because our goal is not that we say no and the dog stops doing the behavior. The goal is that the behavior goes away altogether. It gets inhibited. It disappears.
Goodbye.
All right. So that's one side of the equation here, right? Second side of the equation is, let's see what we got here. He's been lunging and barking not only at other dogs, but people, and it's scaring the shit out of him. All right. Mm-hmm. So the real serious part of the problem is I never know when it will occur, especially with people. So there's a couple of follow-up questions that I would need answered. And we'll try to break them down, obviously, regardless in this thing, right? Mm-hmm. First question, is your dog, even though it's random, is the dog only ever doing it when they're on leash, or do they do it in off-leash scenarios, right? So a lot of times when people say things like this, it'll be predictable enough where it only ever happens on leash, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just inconsistent as far as which person the dog lunges at, right? If that's the case, Step one, management and safety protocols. You have to make sure anytime your dog is on a leash, you maintain enough distance from dogs or people where if your dog lunged at them, they couldn't make contact. That's thing number one. And listen, it's not that tricky. You know, it sounds like a lot, but it's not that tricky. It just means when you're walking, just arc around the people, arc around the dogs. You know what I mean? Just create 10 feet of distance, something like that, just to make sure you have your safety in place, right? If it is happening in situations off leash as well, right? So like people coming over your house, this, that, they come in, they're lunging and stuff at them in that situation, that's where you would start getting into, you have to have a way to manage the dog and keep some distance as well in that situation, or put in place safety protocols like a muzzle or something, right? Then you get into actually correcting for the behavior. So, you know, typically speaking, I don't correct just for the lunging. I try to have a clear thing that I'm asking the dog to do that I can give my correction for, just so you have a black and white criteria, right? So you start with your heeling, right? 9 out of 10 times in cases of leash reactivity issues, the first problem is that the dog does not have clear enough leash walking skills, right? They don't know what's expected of them on the walk. So those corrections, especially if our timing with our no marker is off, those corrections are just kind of coming in all willy-nilly, you know? And the dog doesn't know what they're for. The dog doesn't know how to fix them, et cetera, right? So create clear leash walking skills. We have a couple of really great DIY videos on here getting into like actually how to work through those things. Actually, with that dog Major, we have a leash walking with the e-collar part 1 and leash walking with the e-collar part 2 with him that you could watch that details our process of first teaching the leash walking with the negative reinforcement on the e-collar and then proofing the leash walking with positive punishment and really getting the dog understanding that clear position. That's your first place to start with it. I would watch both of those videos and I would detail both of them to a T. You'll probably need 2 or 3 days in between those videos. So 2 or 3 days doing part 1 and then move on to part 2, obviously, right? Once you have that established, right, you have to make sure that you're positioning yourself up for success of when you're walking, you're creating your distance, and if your dog gets out of that position, right, regardless of if it's to react, regardless of if it's to sniff, regardless of if it's to do anything, if they don't maintain that position, you're going to enforce that position utilizing the methods we talked about with your no marker, utilizing the methods you'll see in the Major video, obviously, of leash walking part 2 with the e-collar. The last variable with it is if your timing is really good and you're holding the dog to a really, really clear criteria with it, your motivation has to match it, right? Is your level high enough? Most times it's not. Most times dogs don't give a shit about the corrections we're giving because we're constantly underwhelming them because we're scared of going too high. Again, we're using aversives, right? The goal is that the dog doesn't like it. So make sure it counts. If you're going to give a correction, so you don't have to nag the dog and do it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Third kind of variable at play with this kind of stuff. You have to make sure that you're not giving the dog a reason to want to lunge, right? So a lot of times in cases like this, people will be trying to proactively correct for the issue, right? They're trying to avoid the problem, but they're still periodically letting people or dogs come up to their dog out on the walk, right? You have to separate socialization for your dog into times where there will literally never be socialization and they don't even have to be concerned about the people and the dogs, and times where the only expectation is them focusing on socialization. Right? So out on the walk, on the leash, period, your dog should be in the state of mind of there will never be a time that another dog or a person comes up to them, right? I literally do this with my dogs. And we get them to a point where we become the most interesting thing on the walk. There's absolutely nothing that they have to be concerned about outside of that, right? Because if not, if your dog is uncomfortable around people or uncomfortable around dogs, and even if once a month a dog comes into their space and that stresses them out, they're going to, over time, continue to look at you and be like, why aren't you handling this? Why aren't you making this scary thing go away? And if your dog starts getting into that state of mind, they're going to start handling that problem on their own. And then what's going to happen is they're going to start proactively handling that problem on their own. And before the person ever even makes contact, they're like, I know you're going to try to come up to me, and I know you ain't going to do shit about it. So I'm going to start proactively barking at you to make you get the fuck away from me before you ever even have a chance to. Right? So it's multifaceted. It's the human side of things of making sure we're setting the proper boundaries for other people and other dogs. We're setting in place the safety protocols to make sure nobody's going to get injured, nobody's in a vulnerable position, and then we hold our dog to the standard of you have to focus on me and not worry about these things.
Yep.
Now, there's obviously 10,000 other variables that could be at play. We're just going off of a short-ish question here that we're trying to answer to the best of our abilities, but that's kind of my recommendation with this kind of stuff. And if you have any follow-up questions to any of those things and you have any additional context you want to provide, feel free to reply back to me, obviously, but you need to start right away with those couple videos I told you and those couple of protocols I told you to do, and you'll probably see absolutely massive, substantial progress from just that.
Yeah, I'll make sure to link the videos at the end.
All right, let me reply to this guy. Just answered your question on the podcast. Will be under episode 58. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
All right, got another one here. What else we got?
All right.
So this is under our video when your dog resource guards you. This has been one of our most viewed videos ever. This one blew up.
Yeah.
Really did. So,
It's an
anyways,
oldie.
Go for it.
All right. Zero in Jack. So I introduced my female dog to my buddy's male dog who has been living with us for a week until he gets a place. She plays with him constantly, but also asserts dominance over him whenever she gets the chance. He is much bigger than her, but is submissive and much gentler with her than when he was with his brother. He's been in here for a week. In the first 4 days, I didn't interfere with either of them when they were playing, but when I'm around and she wants attention, he then wants attention, and she'll snap at him, and he'll pout and walk away. I don't know how to change their behavior, her behavior.
Okay, so a couple things here, right? It sounds like there's not a massive problem going on between them, but it's something that you want to be aware of and you want to set some structure to in a multi-dog household, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, I don't ever want my dogs snapping at each other over me, right? Listen, other things, if they're just hanging out and one of them's getting annoying, they snap and this and that, like that's fine. That's all normal. And frankly, it sounds to me like they've kind of figured out their social hierarchy to an extent, right? Mm-hmm. If she snapped at him and he was like, oh, okay, I'm going to just go away and do something else. Let's not discount, like that's a positive that they have a relationship where they're not continuously challenging each other over things, right? And then you get into also, they were saying she shows dominance over him whenever she gets the chance, this, that. Listen, whatever. You know, like Vera and Waffles have this thing right now where Vera just like humps him all the time, like in an attempt to like show dominance over him and like control him. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're figuring it out. You know what I mean? Like it's really not a big deal. Just let them kind of do their thing. Yeah. Now, with this though, this is kind of a multifaceted question as well, right? So first and foremost, I think it said here, yeah, okay. I didn't interfere with either of them when they were playing, but if I'm around and she wants attention, he then wants attention and she'll snap at him and he'll pout and walk away. So my question first and foremost is how many times is the female dog, essentially eliciting a response out of you when she wants something, right? How often does that dog come up to you and when she comes up to you and nudges you or something, you pet her? Right? Are you teaching her that she has control over your interactions through reinforcing those kind of like habitual kind of behaviors that she's rehearsing? Right? First thing I would do is I would eliminate that. And also, okay, so the dogs are living together, obviously. Okay, I was going to say, I didn't know if this was a situation where they were like just doing like play dates and stuff. Yeah, okay, so they're living together, so we'll treat this as if they're living in the same house, obviously, because they are. So that would be the first thing that I look at. Now, you don't have to necessarily add in any sort of corrections for that or anything, but you want to start deterring that and getting her realizing, like, this pushy behavior isn't working, right? Yep. Second thing, if you are going to give her attention, that's fine. I don't have a problem with you obviously petting the dogs and stuff, but there has to be rules of when I'm interacting with one dog, I set the boundary of the other dog, right? So I kind of play games with my dogs sometimes where I'll call one of them over to me and pet them, and if the other starts to come over and try to butt into the space, before they actually make contact, when they're like 2 feet away or so, I'll make them go away. Right. And usually it's just kind of like a shoo. If that doesn't work, if I need to give a little correction or something for it, I can. But I start setting this boundary if I only interact with one dog at a time, and I try to avoid the pinch points of all the dogs kind of swarming into one area. We'll even see that. One of the number one places we'll see dog fights happen is in between the couch and the coffee table. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's such a tight little corner, and all the dogs to wedge themselves in there. And it's like if one of them gets stressed out or tries to set a correction and the others can't go away and stuff, that's like your most surefire way of like seeing some sort of altercation break out. Right? So that would be another thing I would look at is, in those kind of pinch point situations, are you making sure that you're having control over those areas? Like, I don't let all of the dogs come into that space. Like I said, if one of them comes in and I'm interacting with them, that's fine. But if others start to go in there, like, they got to wait their turn. Right.
Yep.
And I have enough control and enough training over them to make sure I have that established. Now, in your case, the only thing that's tricky about this is because both dogs are not technically speaking yours, like one's your buddy's dog and one's your dog, you're not necessarily going to be able to have the control established over both of them that you need in order to do that. So you're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to either have a conversation with your friend about like, hey, are you cool with me setting some boundaries for your dog? Right? Like, is that okay? Like, are we okay with doing that? Obviously, so that nobody gets pissed off that you're like starting to like correct his dog for certain things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or thing number two, I always say this when you're dealing with like roommates that have dogs and stuff, is basically for a long time until they really start to develop a great relationship with each other, you have to just eliminate the resources that could create problems, right? It's no different than if you're setting up a play date with a friend's dog that they don't live together, right? Because you guys ultimately are going to have different rules for the dogs. So to just expect both of them to just kind of be okay with falling into the groove in the house is a little bit unrealistic at times unless both of you guys are really on the same page with things. So, at that point, you would just make sure that you give them plenty of breaks apart from each other. Anytime they're together, no food, no toys, no affection. And you would just supervise and you would treat it like a play date where they're not in those positions where they're going to come over and try to get attention from you guys or anything. So.
Just answered that. Yeah, we talked about that kind of before, didn't we?
Plenty of times. Yeah, like we talked about it before, I think, in a situation where like people are moving in with other people that have dogs and stuff.
It's just a tough one. I mean, like you said, people are very particular about how they correct their dog. And
which understandably so. You know what I mean? Like, it's your fucking dog. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do with my dog. Like, if I had like somebody come into my house and just start trying to like do shit with my dog and correct them and stuff, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, dude. What do you think you're doing? You know?
Yeah. Go ahead.
They're my rules.
Yeah.
Right? I create my rules. So now I'm not saying like, I don't know, let's say you're here, right? And I needed to go do something for 20 minutes. And I was like, yo, fucking Waffles jumps on this couch. Give him a correction for it, right? Like, if we're on the same page with things, that's not a big deal. Or like all of our trainers at the facility, like a lot of times we'll bring our personal dogs and we kind of have an understanding. Listen, we're still, even amongst ourselves, even though we have the same training program and same rules typically and stuff, we're still not willy-nilly correcting each other's dogs.
Yeah.
You know, like if something happens and Bridget's dog's being annoying or my dog's being annoying or something like that, it's like, hey, are you cool with this, right? Like, are you cool if I stop your dog from doing this? Are you cool if I make your dog do this or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's like a mutual understanding and respect still with that that you have to have because it's not your dog, right? At
the end of the day.
And we've talked about before, where am I going with this? My brain's not working. Oh, yeah. We talked about before, like, even as trainers, we all live different lives with our dogs, right?
Yeah.
Like, I do different things and allow my dogs to do different things than all of our trainers at the facility do, you know? So we have to take those things into consideration where, like, some of those things the dogs may be doing that aren't necessarily major problems, they may be allowed to do at home. You know what I mean? And another side of things, as trainers, let's say you're a new trainer, right? You have to factor that in when you're working with your clients as well, right? Just because we're the trainer doesn't mean we could go in and just like immediately start creating all of these rules and correcting the dog for all of these things that we think we should do until we have that conversation with the owner of like, hey, these are some rules I think you should set. Like let's take jumping or getting on furniture, right? Constantly, I find myself when clients come in to the facility for like a first lesson or drop off or a board and train, they let the dog jump all over the furniture and stuff. And in my mind, it's like, what are you doing? Why are you just coming into a new place and letting your dog jump all over the furniture? But detaching from like my trainer mind. At home, the dog's probably allowed on whatever the hell they want to be on.
Yeah.
So why would it be different here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just an education thing, right? I'm not going to jump in right off the rip and be like, no, why are you letting him do that? Get him off of the furniture. Blah, blah, blah. No, we're going to have a conversation. Hey, this is going to be a rule here. Right? You know, this is why we're setting this to be a rule here. This is how we're ultimately going to enforce it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to have those conversations with people. Just because we do technically know better than them with some of these things doesn't mean we could like remove that human variable of having those conversations and making sure there's the mutual respect of you're still the owner of this dog. This is still your dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, it's that's something I think a lot of people fail to realize too, and I see people do way too quickly. Is I've seen this with past trainers that we used to have. Like, a dog will come in for a follow-up lesson or something, and it'll be maybe a dog they haven't really worked with before or something, and just like right off the rip, as soon as the client walks in the door, it's like, make him do this, make him do that, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? It's like, and it can be very off-putting, right? Like, and I remember dealing with that frequently with a particular trainer that used to work for me a while ago. That, I'd be like, hey, just tone him, like, get him in, have a conversation with them, right? We're going to nitpick all of those things. I get it, right? We do need the dog not to do those things, but let's establish the relationship first. You know what I mean? Let's not have it be like I'm just freaking bullying the shit out of you, like right off the rip when you walk in the door.
Listen here.
Yeah. It's like as soon as they walk in, look at me. I am the captain now.
I am the captain now.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
So, I don't know. All right. Those are pretty good questions.
Those were good.
You got any follow-up points, any of those things? Any of your non-dog trainer mind opinions?
No, because I think... I think you answered it all pretty much perfectly. I do like the one with the when to correct the dog, It's... Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people will get it confused that's the correct, like that's the marker.
That's it. People think this is it. This is the power.
Yeah.
Right? It's not.
It's your words. It's
not. This is just a tool, It's just a freaking tool, right? And, this is the constant back and forth struggle, like just in dog training. And again, like, we have phenomenal trainers at the facility. Phenomenal freaking trainers, right? Our clients love our trainers, obviously, right? But some of them are still novice. Like some of them are still learning. We're all still learning. I'm still, you know what I mean? So I kind of I find myself sometimes, like when I'm doing my one-on-ones with some of the trainers and stuff, I find myself having really interesting conversations with them and really productive conversations with them that like I try to like sprinkle in when like they're ready for it, if that makes sense. Like I think as a trainer, you could get thrown, let's say you just started training dogs today, right? Yeah. Like, and you're like, I'm committed, I'm going to be a dog trainer. And I just sat here for 2 hours and just fucking dropped knowledge on you, and gave you literally all of the secrets, every secret ever, right? Everything you could ever need to know about dog training, right?
Okay.
You're not going to be ready to take in all of that information.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, not only because of the mass amount of it, but there are certain things in dog training and certain concepts and stuff that until you really get to play with them and you really get to see firsthand, like the issues with not doing some of these concepts or not understanding some of these concepts, I could tell you something, but it's not going to immediately resonate with you. You know what I mean? So I could see with each individual trainer as they're progressing through their journey, what pieces of information they're ready for and what pieces of information they need to be put on them when they're ready to digest those things, right? And one of them is, listen, we're e-collar trainers, right? But we're dog trainers, right? And an e-collar is a tool that we use, and I'm okay with saying we're e-collar trainers because I think it's important to be transparent that this is a tool we rely on, right? This is a tool that is one of the most beneficial things that we use in our training program.
Yeah, of course.
But we're still dog trainers.
Yeah.
Right? Just like, like we're balanced trainers or we're positive trainers, we're force-free trainers. We're all just dog trainers. You know what I mean? And whatever tool of choice we rely on heavily, we can't forget that we're still just dog trainers, right? And sometimes it's okay to just take this thing and just put it away sometimes. You know what I mean? Because as a dog trainer, it's important to say, if I am very reliant on this tool, if this is a big key to the success, right? That's cool. I'm okay with that, right? But I have to know what to do if I don't have it on me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have to know how to give my dog good information still. I have to know how to motivate my dog still, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, a couple trainers lately, we've been kind of getting into that, which that's the most kind of contradicting, strange conversation that you could have, like when everything you know is being an e-collar trainer with things of like, sometimes you got to just put the e-collar away and you got to just train the dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is where, like, I'm sure this is only kind of partially making sense to everybody, and like, it's kind of just like, it's a weird concept, like, because the e-collar solves so many of the problems that we have with dogs, but it also, if you lean on it too much, can create some problems that you don't want, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I don't really know where the fuck. Honestly, I don't know where I'm going with the conversation completely with that, but I think I think the key point of it is just like, we got to focus on we're dog trainers, right? We're not just a particular tool trainer.
Yeah.
Right. And the more you could understand all realms of dog training, and the more you could understand and look at, like, what am I trying to accomplish? Right. The better of a dog trainer you're going to become. Another great example. Right. Kayla was getting ready to leave yesterday, and Watson, her corgi, whatever, he was, when he first did training, or when she first started training him, I should say, he was a real pain in the ass, right? Like, you know Watson, right? Watson was a real dick.
Yeah.
Right?
He's got that corgi mentality.
He's got that corgi mentality.
What's it, Napoleon syndrome?
Something like
little
that.
Dog.
Whatever. So whatever. So he's trained, right? He listens. She's like, he listens great. It's not I don't have any issues with him. She's like, I want to have more fun with him though. I was like, hell yeah, let's have more fun with him.
Yeah.
So she was asking, she's like, well, with the e-collar, like, how do I get him more confident with the e-collar and this and that? I was like, you don't. Like, this is not the tool for making your dog more confident from that standard, right? This is a tool that simply just allows clarity and allows for us to communicate boundaries and stuff with our dog, right? And it could create more confidence than your dog had before if you're working with insecure dogs because it's clear communication. But ultimately, if our goal is I want to just have more fun with my dog, you need to figure out a way to motivate them.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We sat down and we did just like an impromptu, like literally impromptu. Like she was talking, I was working a dog. I was like, I put that dog away. I was like, get fucking Watson out. Let's fucking do some shit with him, right? We busted his ass out, right? We did a couple commands, and like the first like 4 or 5 commands, he was just like begrudgingly like, okay, I'll get on the bed, fuck you. Okay, I'll get on the down, fuck you, this, that, right? And I realized that he was plenty motivated of what not to do. He was plenty motivated to do those commands, right? From the standpoint of like, there was no resistance behind any of it. Even if he made a mistake, I could literally just tell him no with like a level 1 correction, and that was more than enough to get him to fix himself and everything. So there was no motivation issue from the standpoint of like what not to do, right? So I just worked with him, right? And I kind of just like loosened him up a little bit and realized there's no big corrections coming right now because there doesn't need to be any big corrections coming right now. You're listening fine.
Yeah.
Right? You're not resisting me at all, right? And then finally, I started seeing him loosen up a little bit. I started offering him a little bit of food, and he's never been a massively food-motivated dog. He's got some food drive, but like when he gets into his training mode, he's like, I don't really want to do this. I'll do it. So he stops taking food and this and that. And suddenly he started taking a little piece of kibble, right? A couple more pieces of kibble, right? And then we started seeing him kind of like, oh, all right. This is cool, right? And nothing changed from the standpoint of like he was still he listened to the commands before. He was listening to the commands now, but he had more drive to do it, right? He started getting a little bit more pep in his step and getting a little bit more confidence behind it and stuff like that. And that's where, like I said, this e-collar like really saved that dog from the standpoint of like his problems you would not have been able to solve if you started the way that I just did that session the other day.
No.
You know what I mean? It wouldn't have got you anywhere, right? Because we needed to establish that respect out of him, right? But after that, I told her, I was like, she said, she's not having any problems with him. There's no issue. She's like, I just want to have more fun with him. Hell yeah. Get the fucking treats out. Get the food out. Get the toys out, right? Have fun with your dog. Just train your dog. And that's where you need to know where to just put this thing away. This doesn't matter right now. If he does something that he's not supposed to do, we need to give a correction. Sure, right? It matters then. But we need to just have fun with him. That's it. We worked through all the hard stuff. And that's where you got to separate your mind. That's kind of what I'm getting, like this is my big roundabout way of saying we can't forget that we're still dog trainers, right?
Yeah.
We can't get it in the head that like this problem is going to get solved with this because we're e-collar trainers. You know what I mean? We're dog trainers. So we need to know where this is appropriate. We need to know where the treats are appropriate. We need to know where the bonker is appropriate. We need to know where the prong, you know what I mean? We need to know where all these different tools are appropriate to use. I mean, that's it, man. I mean, it was such a cool session. You know what I mean? Like, and she told me, she's like, I could literally, like after we finished that session, like she was pumped. She's like, I could count on one hand how many times he's taken food in a session.
Yeah.
You know? And he was pumped by the end of the session, right? He had some motivation behind him, right? And it's because we realized what he needed in that moment. And what he needed was not any e-collar stuff, because we did the e-collar stuff. We worked through the problems with the e-collar, right? He needed to be motivated.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, and I think you're very correct. The like people get this assumption that we go get our dog trained and then we have to be in this strict mode forever.
Sure.
You know, it's I've had a couple of conversations with people on that, and they're like, well, if we do that, then like, will our dog still be fun anymore or whatever? You know, you initially have to like Watson, get them in line, but after that, it's still your dog. Go have fun.
Go have some fucking fun with your dog.
Yeah, once you figure it out, you have that bond with that dog that he knows what to do, what not to do. Let him loose.
And here's the thing, right? Like it's such a delicate back and forth conversation, because like I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying as, your dog, like I was saying, like your dog is never supposed to look stressed out, right? Or your dog is never supposed to get big corrections for things. Or, if you start off training with just the e-collar and your main emphasis is the e-collar, that you're doing something incorrect, because that's not the case, right? You just have to shift in your mind what the goal is. What is the training goal we have right now?
Yep.
That's it, man. And again, like with Waffles, for example, I use him as an example where I did the heavy lifting initially of creating the consequences for things and correcting for stuff and making sure he knew what the fuck not to do initially. Yeah. So that I could take my time with the training. And now here's the thing, like he still doesn't know all of his commands, right? He's still not doing perfect come commands and down stays and bed stays and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Right. But I'm having fun training him. Yeah. I've for the last week tried to, and a lot of this is just my own laziness, right? But like I've really tried in the last week to like designate like one good training session in a day, and just in the last week. But when I go to put them in their crates, like I'll put the dogs in their crates and I'll dish out his food and we'll do a quick training session down there, and it's fun. He's motivated. He's peppy, right? Like it's cool, And I'm in no rush to do anything else with that, right? And that's my emphasis with him. I want him to enjoy the process because I spend all the time focusing on what not to do, right? And again, I'm a professional trainer, right? I can get away with doing some of those things. Some clients are not going to be able to do that, right? And you have other variables of, some dogs just have no fucking motivation, and the amount of time and headache it would take to create the motivation out of the dog is just like borderline, at least to the owner, not worth it. Like some of these dogs that just been free fed their entire lives, right? Or just overfed their entire lives, or get 9,000 treats and stuff like that. Like if you really look at a dog like that and look at what it's going to take to create motivation, to me, it wouldn't be hard. Like if I got the dog, like I would build the dog's motivation, obviously. But to the owner, it's like, okay, cool. Is this owner actually going to not give the dog treats anymore? Some of them, sure. Yeah. There's some that I'll have that conversation with. They're like, oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. I won't do that. Others are just so freaking emotionally attached to, I give my dog cookies for everything. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, then you get into the conversation of like, okay, well, like that's kind of a part of the problem, isn't it? Well, yeah, but it's like, there's so many parts to the problem that it's like, which, you pick and choose your battles that you fight, right? It's like, yes, the owner wanting to give the dog a cookie for everything is an issue. Right? Like that is a part of the reason why the dog is probably rehearsing negative behaviors. But it's a very small part of that equation, where if I address all the bigger things and I fight those fights with the owner and they still just kind of free feed the dog and give the dog cookies all the time, whatever. As long as we still get the goal, you know what I mean? As long as we still get it accomplished. Are they going to stop giving the dog treats all the time? Are they going to stick to a feeding schedule, feeding the dog twice a day as opposed to just filling up the bowl? Like, again, some people are kind of lazy. You know what I mean? Like, some people are lazy. They just want to scoop the bowl and just set it down and just not worry about it for the rest of the day kind of thing. You know what I mean? Are they going to be okay with initially that the dog may go 4-5 days not fucking eating? You know what I mean? Like, we've seen that before with dogs where it's like, okay, cool. They're used to free feeding all the time. And suddenly we cut their food back to a feeding schedule and we put it down. We give them 10 minutes to eat it. They don't eat it. It goes away. We put it down. We give them 10 minutes to eat it. We've seen dogs go 4 or 5 days without touching the food because they're just so conditioned to like it's always available and I don't really want it right now. And then it goes away. And finally, you know, I always say dogs are smart. Like, they're not going to let themselves starve.
No.
Right? When they're hungry enough, they will eat the food.
Yeah.
Right? But some owners, they're not going to do that, you know? And I understand. I'm not saying that I don't get the human emotion of, you know, oh, but he's not eating anything. He's going to be hungry, this, that. But you're offering it, right?
Yeah.
You're offering it to him, and he's just choosing not to take it, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, and then another side of things, Kayla was also asking me, right? So she was saying, she was like, well, like, I want to get his motivation up. This was before he started taking the food, right? She was like, well, do I need to get something higher value? Like, should I make like chicken or get a tastier treat or something like that? I was like, that's looking at it from the wrong light, right? Because here's the thing, right?
That's some Zach George stuff.
Well, not even just that, right?
I know.
Here's the problem with that mentality, right? The problem is not that he's not motivated enough for the food, right? The problem is that we're not communicating clearly enough and we're not being aware enough that he doesn't need the corrections in that moment, which are causing him to stress out and not take the food he's typically motivated for.
Yeah.
Right? So by saying we just up the motivation of the food and that'll solve the problem, that's not causing you to fix your e-collar issues. That's not causing you to be more in tune with what your dog needs or doesn't need from a correction standpoint, which is causing unnecessary stress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's kind of the same mentality as like if say you're just an e-collar trainer and the dog's not listening, right? Saying, well, we need to increase the level. We need to increase the level. We need to increase the level. That's not always the solution because though that may work, right? The issue really was you weren't giving clear enough direction to the dog. And if you gave better direction to the dog, you probably could have got away with working the dog at a lower level.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to always look at those different variables with things. So.
Yeah. One more, another point I was thinking of, like,
this is a good. I feel like this is a good little random conversation here. You know, like this is something we don't talk about that much, right? I don't have this conversation that much because most of my communicating is telling people to use the e-collar more, right? But in some people's cases, depending on what the goal is and depending on if you're having issues or not, sometimes it's use it less.
Yeah.
Or I should say, sometimes it's implement something else into the mix to help.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was going to say, I think a big reason why people get so caught up on the e-collar is, you know, non-trainers, I guess, you know, send home people, dog owners in general, you know. Newbies, yeah. I think is because at home they've tried, you know, saying no or giving commands and nothing ever worked. So now that they come to get the training, they're like, oh, well, the big difference is that we have this e-collar now, you know? So I think that's
a good point.
That's a very good point. Stipulation of why people get it in their head that, oh, we it's the e-collar that's different because I was saying no at home, but they don't understand that they were saying
the details behind it. Yeah. And that's no different than a lot of people let's say, because here's the thing, right? Like I'm playing devil's advocate and bouncing back and forth here. We have a lot of clients that'll come to us that they call and they're like, I tried a force-free or positive only training program and it didn't work, right?
Yep.
The dog listened, but they only listened if I had a cookie out, right? And I openly tell every single one of them when I hear that exact thing, well, that's not because of the force-free training, right? Like force-free training doesn't get your dog contingent on seeing a treat in your hand, no different than e-collar training doesn't get the dog contingent on seeing a remote in your hand. That has to do with your timing and your communication and how you're implementing your markers and your actual handling abilities, right? There's plenty of stuff. Like when I used to do competition training, a lot of the competition training I did was primarily reward-based. There wasn't a lot of correction implemented into those things because we're just teaching precise behaviors, right? And I didn't have that problem. And that wasn't because I was using e-collars and stuff like that. That was because I understood the mechanics of the training that I was doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hold on. We got another comment. What do we got here?
Oh, we just got another one.
Oh, this is perfect. Complete Canine replied back. What are they going to say?
Okay. Oh, my. All right.
Ooh, this should be a good one.
Complete Canine has replied and said, yeah, I attempted to refer my 7+ years as an emergency vet tech where I saw countless HBC, which is hit by car, dogs come in. Sometimes dead on arrival that could have been prevented through recall training, which I always recommend proofing and conditioning with low stem/vibrate on a remote collar, especially in major cities like mine, L.A., oh, definitely in L.A., with highways. But that was shut down by her as low stem was a cop-out and how it's not fair to the dog, as even low stem is unnatural to the dog. Thanks for allowing me to vent. Smiley face.
I get it, right? And here's the thing, right? Like, low stem is unnatural to the dog, right? There's nothing in nature that's going to feel like it, obviously.
Yeah.
But, like, why is that a big deal?
Yeah.
Why is us showing the dog a new sensation and teaching the dog how to escape and avoid it like that big of a deal, right? Like, I don't see that as a problem, right? And then, listen, here's the thing also, right? And this is a conversation. So, I talk a lot about Larry Crone, for example, and like, I think right now he's kind of doing a disservice to the e-collar community by doing nothing but bashing e-collar trainers, right? But he had a conversation with Ivan Balabanov as well, where they basically were arguing. Larry was trying to say, like, e-collar should always be this low and positive thing to the dogs. And Ivan was just saying, like, let's not sugarcoat it, right? Like, when I if I'm doing a recall with my dog and they're off leash and they blow me off because they're thinking about chasing a squirrel or a deer, I nail them for it. Mm-hmm. They have to realize that's not okay, right? If my dog runs for the street, yes, initially we'll teach it with low stem, right? To make sure the dog understands how to escape and avoid that pressure, right? But once I've done that, we're proofing that, right? You go for the street, it's going to not be fun to go for the street.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to make them stop doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So I completely obviously understand what this person is saying, but like, I'm not going to sugarcoat those things, right? And that's why we're catching the heat online, is because we're not sugarcoating these things. These dogs have to realize when it comes to dangerous behaviors, right, that it is not okay to do those things.
No.
I'm not going to nice it over.
No. And see, the big thing I don't understand is, so I have something that could stop my dog from getting killed or injured way worse than a little,
What was that?
Just a little stem, and
It's like the Michael Jackson.
yeah, and like, okay, it's not natural, but it's a motivator. Like, that isn't that the whole thing that dogs like?
It's something they want to avoid.
Yeah,
That's why it works.
yeah.
So, yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And then you also get into, right? So this person was a 7+ year emergency vet tech, right?
Yeah.
So past just that, right? Like, again, you get into the conversation that, like, a lot of the argument behind positive only training right now is that the American veterinarian community or whatever it is, like, has their position stance on positive only training, right? And why that's everything. Yet there's people that work in the vet community with vets, right? And there are plenty of veterinarians out there that do not agree with that.
Yeah.
Right? And again, you just circle this back into the real world, right? Like, all of the issues we're seeing as society, right? And everything needs to be this way because of the science. Yeah. But on the contrary, there are scientists or people in those positions that we're saying should have the authority to make those decisions that are disagreeing with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. Like, how do you dictate who decides?
Yeah.
You don't.
Well, I mean, Kevin's owners.
Yep. Oh yeah, she's a vet tech.
Yeah, the wife is a vet tech, and so it's just they tried like the more positive experience or whatever, and it didn't work with Kevin, obviously.
Yep.
So they came to you guys. It's like, I just don't. Full circle to the beginning of this. It's like, I don't understand like why it is so taboo if one style of training works for you compared to the other. Like you said, at the end of the day, we're all dog trainers, and if one way doesn't work, then why should you shun the one that did work for somebody?
Yeah, because there's a better way to do it is what it comes down to, right? Quote unquote, right? A better way to do it, right? There's a more humane way to do it is kind of the argument, right? So it's like, okay, cool. Even if that worked, right, you still went above and beyond what was necessary in order to achieve those results, which we broke down, I think, the definition of abuse, right? Technically, I think abuse, the definition of it. Here, let me pull it up one more time here.
All right.
So I can see, because this is their argument, right? right? So abuse, improper use of something, cruel or violent treatment. There was actually another definition that I saw somewhere that was.
I like that first one. To bad effect or for a bad purpose misuse.
Yeah, but there was I don't know, whatever. There was a definition that I saw. Or more definitions. I don't know. There's a specific one that kind of goes hand in hand with it. There's so many different.
Insulting or offensive language.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever. So there was one that I saw somewhere that basically was like to misuse or use something past what is necessary, right? Or an amount of force past what is necessary to achieve a result, right? And in their mind, because these things can be achieved with less force, that would technically get categorized as abuse. But this is where, again, we talked last time, semantics of all this kind of stuff. My problem is like, I could agree with what they're saying, right? I understand. And if we wanted to use that definition, right? Like, sure, I guess that would be an appropriate definition of that, right? It would be abuse if there technically was a way to do it with less pressure. But what definition are they using as, the federal standard for when they prosecute people over these types of things, right? Like, so then you get into like, just like the word hit, like we talked about, like, is abuse always this massive offense like that, right? I don't know. It's a tough conversation.
I mean, some people you're just never going to get through to them.
I don't know, man. Whatever. So, I think that was, like I said, though, I think that was a really good conversation just on getting into use of e-collars, use of motivation, just talking about like, this is the conversation I want to have, right? There are times where we need to look at us as just being dog trainers, right? We are dog trainers here, right? And we need to forget the tools sometimes. We need to forget all of the arguments between communities and stuff like that. And we need to look at sometimes just helping each other be better dog trainers overall. Right? And the more we could open up about that, and the more we could have tough conversations with people, and the more we could not try to shoot people down, but shoot to understand, we're going to get a hell of a lot further. And the community will actually start seeing change at that point. And there are some trainers out there that are having good conversations right now. But again, full circle back to things, the fact that we can't have the conversation with some of these people because they refuse to, it's limiting the ability to make any sort of real change in the dog training community.
Yep.
So there's no solution to it other than that. But I think today was a good one. So
it was a good podcast.
Yeah. So
we were in the flow.
We're just vibing, answering some questions, getting into some topics.
Dude, that was pretty cool. Real time
reply
there.
Yeah, I told her, I was like, we're live on the podcast discussing this right now. Or him or whoever it was. I don't know who that person is, obviously. Cool. One little plug here. So I did a phenomenal hour-long virtual Skype business or Zoom business consult with a trainer out in Los Angeles the other day. You actually see right here. We vlogged a lot of it. We put a lot of the conversations that we had in there. So we do offer business consulting. We do offer training consulting and stuff like that to any trainers out there that may be listening to this that are interested in those things. I charge $150 an hour for that, and they're very productive. And you'll see in this, like, excuse me, once you're in our community, like you're in our community, right? Like these people that we do these consults with, like they have my cell phone number. They know they can text me at any time. They know if they have any follow-up questions, they can give me a call.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yes, I do charge for that initial one. And if you ever want to have like a formal sit down, like hour, like hashings out and stuff like that, like I charge for that. But like we just talked about, full circle with everything, I want to help dog trainers be able to help more dog owners, right? And I love doing things like that, and I love being able to provide value to people. So if anybody is looking to have a conversation, looking to discuss any sort of issues or this or that they're having in their dog training business from a training standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a social media standpoint, from a client relations standpoint, like we've experienced, this is one thing I talked with Max about. We've experienced so many hurdles, right? Like in the last however many years that I've been doing this, so many hurdles and so many odd situations that we've dealt with and stuff like that, that to some people that aren't prepared for those types of things, it could cripple you if you don't know how to handle it. you know? So if you're interested in those things, email me at david@miraclecaninetraining.com, and I'd be happy to get you on the calendar for one. So
Do it up.
anything else, Josh?
Nope. It was a wonderful, wonderful time.
What a wonderful time. That was a great, nice podcast.
It was a good change of pace
A
after
little more
last week.
lighthearted, I feel like.
Yeah. We needed that. We needed it.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap that up. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya.